Welcome to the Newtown Big Dreams podcast, an interview-style talk show that's your gateway to the fabulous and fascinating people who relocated to start a new life. Whether you're new to our podcast or your city, our fellow neighbors from across Canada, North America, and the entire English-speaking world share their stories of reaching new horizons and big dreams. So sit back and relax as we navigate in-depth and intimate conversations with entrepreneurs, thought leaders, executives, creatives, and anyone who can share their story about their Newtown big dreams. And now, here's your host, Luke J. Menkes.
So I'm here today with Kevin Kishor, and Kevin is a book author, and he's got a really interesting book title. It's called Chocolate Covered French Fries, A Recipe for Any Relationship. So Kevin, thanks for coming in. I want to talk to you about the book. But first of all, tell us how you came to Kelowna in 1999. What's the story behind that?
Okay, well, thanks for having me. And so the short version is that I was living in the Toronto area, and my mother had come out here first, and we had come to visit at the time I was married, and we wanted to check it out. My ex-wife now really loved the place, and when we went back home, I came out for a visit on my own to check it out to see if there were any real potentials. And at that time, I don't know how long you've been here, but
7.5 years.
Okay, so at that time, there wasn't as much going on in the city.
Right.
It was just starting to boom. And when I went back home, I said, I don't think there's any opportunity there compared to where we were living at the time.
Yeah. What part of Toronto are you from? 'Cause I grew up in Mississauga.
Okay, so my dad is he's still in East York, so pretty close to downtown.
Yeah.
I was kind of all over Toronto there, like I have family everywhere.
Yeah.
And then my mom's side is from Kitchener, which is like half an hour west, like the distance to Vernon, basically. But that area is 500,000 people too. So it's it's a real contrast from Kelowna to back there, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, no way, we're not going. So we'd kind of laid it to rest. And then about 6 months later, I felt like I had a spiritual calling and that I had work to do out here. I wasn't sure what it was, but we took a leap of faith and we sold everything, got on a plane and just came out here. I mean, thankfully we had some family here to touch down with. And then it was one thing at one foot in front of the other after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you left for a while?
Left
the city.
Kelowna.
Yeah.
So we moved back. I've been homesick every year probably since I've been here, right? Growing up there, the culture, the family, all that. So we left. I went back to finish my first degree at University of Waterloo, and then we came back again. So we technically moved across the country 3 times, right? In a few years. And then just kind of got to work here, and you can't beat the weather and the beauty and all that's here in Kelowna.
Yeah. And I guess it's a little easier now to be an entrepreneur, to be a book author, because of the internet, and, we're kind of connected. You could have a Skype call or a Zoom call pretty easily. It's not something you could really do in 1999. Right?
Yeah, and back then when I came to Kelowna, certainly being an author was not in my plans.
Really?
It's definitely something that's evolved over the years. So the short version again, because we've only got a short time for this podcast, is that I had a long career. I spent a lot of time working with families and couples, just supporting them. I spent about a decade helping people decide if they wanted to get married and helping them prepare for that and supporting them through that process. And I really loved the work too, right? And then as things changed in my life and changed career paths and all that, I ended up starting a brand management company. There was other ventures before that. With my daughter, my oldest daughter, and my sister, actually, which is funny. And so we were working with different, all different industries here, local as like, artists, fashion, restaurants, things like that, sports. And as a brand manager, I always tell people, you know, when it's time to build your own brand, you need to pick the medium that's best for you at that time, at least, because you're going to have to use them all eventually.
Right.
And for me, writing was always the first, like what came to mind first for me. It was easy for me because I was, you know, I'm master's educated, and so I did a lot of writing in my life. And so I just started with that. I just started writing, and it flowed. I mean, there's a little bit of a backstory to that. So if you want me to tell you a little bit more about the creative process, I can.
So sure. Yeah, definitely. So what was your master's degree in?
So it was theology and leadership.
Okay.
My first degree was in religious cultural history. So I've always been really fascinated with both the things that are unseen, which I think also love is a big part of that. So the second book is on love and spirituality for that reason. And which is not ready yet, obviously. The first book is still rolling out. But so, and also where people come from and like what makes them who they are, because culture and heritage and all that has such a big part of it, which I think, you know, you're kind of hitting on to here in this podcast with people coming to Kelowna from different places and all that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Definitely. So tell us about this book. How did you come up with the title for the book?
Well, so the creative process happened in a way that, like, when I went through a divorce, right? And I went through a really tough time, and I spent a lot of time, you know, trying to practice what I preach when I was helping other people and in my past career. And I was consuming a lot, taking in a lot of really good stuff, you know, like on YouTube, reading lots of books. You know, I see you've got like Napoleon Hill, Tony Robbins on your bookshelf, you know, things like that. Yeah. And like spiritual work and all that. And I was consuming. And then I hit a point where it was like my inner voice was ready. And the switch happened where it was time to start creating again instead of consuming as much as I was. And so then, you know, it started to flow out of me, and I was writing. And the first title for the book was actually The Relationship Code, and like cracking the chaos of our culture. That's what we were going to go with. And, you know, I liked it, but at that time, there's a lot of books like that, like the LinkedIn Code, which was another local author, right? And things like that. And I don't know, I wasn't 100% crazy about it. It was kind of boring a little bit. And
it explains what the book is, but it's not really catchy.
So I do talk about the title in my introduction in the book, so I don't want to fully give it away. But but basically it was in a conversation with my daughter, one of my daughters. We were on a road trip, and she just said, "Have you ever had chocolate covered French fries, or do you think anybody has ever had that, or is it a thing?" And then just like a light bulb went off. For some reason, the parallel to relationships for me happened, because basically you're taking two different things that on their own are great, and most people would agree, chocolate and French fries. Put them together, they could be either disgusting or delicious, right? Which is relationships to me, right?
So is your book dealing a lot with different cultures coming together?
No.
In a relationship? No.
So the book, the way it happened, as I gave myself like 8 weeks I had a goal that I wanted to write it in. So just for that time period, I just every night just powered through it. And what came out of that was practical principles. So it's basically 6 core chapters that are principles that you could apply in any relationship. It doesn't have to be romantic, can be parents, coworkers, friends, whatever, because all life is relationships, right? Yeah. And I was just like, with things I've learned along the way, things I've gleaned, like wisdom, research, my own education, my own experience, all that. And I just thought, I put it down that way. So that's how it flows. It's just one principle after another that are like sort of the key things. And especially when I used to prepare people for marriage, I used to talk a lot about some of those things. Right? Yeah.
So 8 weeks to write. You set that deadline for yourself. Was that a magic number in some way?
No, it just so happened the 8 weeks for the writing. I mean, it was a longer process, obviously, like, you know, it had been growing in me, and like I had been journaling, and the way just to back it up a bit, the way it had happened was I had a friend who at the time who still is doing health coaching online, and they had approached me and said when I left my last career that maybe I should consider doing like life coaching online for men in particular, because we know that, you know, men are not as likely to go seek out, you know, we don't tend to read this kind of stuff as much. We don't ask for help, whatever. So anyway, long story short, I started to formulate that, and then I put it aside because I was kind of burnt out from the work I was doing before. And then as I was going through my own process, I was writing a lot, journaling, you know, doing things, trying to figure out what am I going to do with that? Maybe to be a blog, maybe to be a vlog, maybe to be whatever. And then all that came together when I started writing. And then at that time of year, it was in the fall. And I said, I want to have this done before the close of the year. That was my goal. So that by Christmas time, and I was going back home, I like to go home for Christmas. And my cousin, he did the first main editing of it because he's a journalist. And, so I knew that I was going to be going. I wanted to have something in hand so that we could go. And then it was basically like a year of editing after that. Yeah.
So that's interesting. Your experience with master's degree got you used to writing a lot, researching a lot, and taking a lot of notes, right? I think a lot of people don't realize how much work actually goes into a book. You know, some people might hear, well, I got it done in 8 weeks and think it's like a super easy thing. But you had a ton of material in your journals to put into that. So was it mostly like sorting through it, deciding what you're going to include, changing the phrasing to make it like a narrative?
Yeah, I mean, it was very different from the papers I wrote in school, you know, for sure. So it wasn't like quoting a lot of people and having to reference a lot, because a lot of it was my own words, my own experience. It's an easy read. That was my goal. So the book is only 78 pages. I don't know if that's considered an easy read for most people, but I wanted it to be in the spirit of a lot of the coffee table books that are out, you know, like, because for me, some of the most impactful books have been smaller books. You know, they're easy to digest, you know, like the 4 principles of, you know, or the 4 agreements, sorry. You know, things like Think and Grow Rich, like the 12 Pillars was a big one. There's just tons of books that are easy reads, you know, like The Art of War is one of the biggest sellers of all time. It's so tiny, right? And so I wanted to keep it short, to the point. And I've always been like that in everything I do, like the coaching that I've done with people, or advice, you know, if I'm giving people or whatever, teaching, anything that I've done. It's like, we need to make it practical and not so theoretical, you know, in that sense. So that was the thing. It was like, it was all in me, and I did have the notes and that. And so it was just get it out and pare it down as much as possible. You know, if you could say it in 100 words, don't take 1,000 words. That's what I always tell people. Right.
Is it based on romantic relationships or all kinds of relationships?
It's based on any kind of relationship. So it's just practical principles that you can apply in any, you know, obviously romantic relationships are probably the one that we see the most in terms of when it becomes a thing, relationships, right? You know, and I think, you know, being a father, I have 6 children, you know, for people who are listening to this, if they haven't read about me yet. They were all from my one marriage. You know, we started young, and we were open to having kids. So it's a very dynamic family, right? And so we're in relationship all the time. But again, the root is the marriage relationship, right? And I find we don't awaken to that, you know, until we're adults as much. And, you know, even though we date when we're in high school and things like that, and college and all that, it's when it becomes real that we're like, ooh, well, am I good at this? Or is the person I'm with bad at relationships? Or, you know, and we start to look at, well, some of us anyway, will start to think, well, where did I get my background from in this? And that's what I want, really. Like I said, I post a vlog every week just to kind of raise the issue, and a podcast as well is coming. But the whole point is that in school, we don't learn about relationships typically. Money and relationships, they say, they don't teach us about, and it's not to knock education. I mean, they're trying to teach us other things. But how do we learn about it? It's usually through trial by fire, like in life, and usually like really crappy relationships that teach us, or from our parents or our extended family. And let's face it, most of us have dysfunctional families in some way, shape, or form, right? And so if that's our blueprint, and we wait until we have like a crisis when we're married or something like that to go looking for it, then we're way behind in that sense. Right? So if I can help, that was the goal, I guess.
Do you now you've been in this kind of field of work for a long, long time? Yes. Do you feel that you learned something through the breakup? Did you look back on the breakup and say, you know what, here's some principles that I didn't fully apply?
Yes. It's the hardest thing I think I've ever had to go through, other than being a young father. That was the other hardest probably challenge for me. But definitely a breakup. Like, I always wanted to be a family unit and, have that, I had this vision of growing old, my kids coming back to the home that they grew up in, kind of thing. And so that once that all was kind of crumbled, and I obviously have my responsibility in that. Everybody, when a breakup happens, we're all part of it. It's incredibly devastating for one, and they say that often those are the greatest learning lessons for us. Right. And if anything, learning to take responsibility for ourselves and our actions and doing something with that is the most important lesson, I think, that I learned. It's sure, you could go back and I could have done this differently, or I could have done that differently, or maybe if I had better tools or whatever, even though we were both, my ex-wife is a counselor, that's one of her, training backgrounds or whatever. And like I said, I've been working with families and couples for years. And so you can have all the tools in the world and know all the stuff, but life is real and humans are humans. And sometimes we just, we just do things and we mess up or whatever it is. And at the end of the day, you have to be able to own that and hopefully learn from it. Right. Yeah. And that, so now, I definitely pour a lot of that into the book, but this book is not so much about me. That's the one thing. So this is the first of 3. That's the plan. So this one is practical principles. The second one is going to be on love and spirituality, because I believe that needs its own book. And I mentioned that in this book that, people are surprised I don't talk about love that much when it comes to relationships. And then the third book is, the title I'm thinking about is Father of 6, Master of None. and that one would be about my own dynamics in my life, right? In a sense, and what I've learned in that way. So, so you don't get to see as much of me in the book as opposed to what I've learned, right?
That makes sense to me. That the book that's more about you would be a future book, because once you've got the reputation of knowing what you're talking about and having a lot of wisdom, then people are going to be super interested to know about you and your story.
Yeah, right? I hope so. There's a small community that I believe that is doing this kind of work out there, that's producing material and talking about it. Sure, there's a lot of counselors and great, people in that field. But in terms of the world of literature, and that, aside from say the psychology department and textbooks and that sort of thing at any university, in the I guess pop culture or the wider world of media and that sort of thing, I do reference a lot of them in my book, because I appreciate they've helped me, and I see myself as hopefully being part of that next generation. So we have the big giants in that area, like John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and then 20 years later, he wrote Mars on Fire, Venus on Ice. He's a big one. Like I said, it's a small community. The Chapmans, who wrote The 5 Love Languages. there's like the Gottmans. I mentioned most of them in my book. Esther Perel is a big one. Brene Brown, but it's a like I said, it's not a huge community that is talking about this. I feel like.
Yeah. Is your target audience primarily men?
No.
But
surprisingly, a lot of men watch my vlogs, I find, and have been interested in the book.
Yeah. I think it's really important because I agree with what you said that men generally they kind of avoid these topics, and especially when it comes to conversation. Like, we don't like to say to other men, hey, I'm having a problem in my relationship, right? There's kind of a stigma to a man that's having a problem.
Yes.
But I think it's become more popular for people to watch vlogs and pick up books.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think men are starting to evolve in that way. We are starting to realize that, we hurt just as much. Actually, according to research that I had come across in my journey, is that we men actually feel our feelings in technicolor.
Wow.
So in more, that's the saying that they use, but that we experience them more intensely than women. But we've been obviously conditioned to kind of bury them, right?
Yes. And
so women tend to process them more openly. They're more wired for, relationships and that than we are. Whereas we've, anthropologically, we're more wired towards protection and
hunting.
Yeah, things like that, right? So yes, I think men are coming along. And sometimes I've been a little hard on them. But when I went through my divorce, which was very interesting, it was mostly men that were knocking on my door, because we all know that every second marriage pretty much ends these days, right? And so every second person I talk to is going through or has gone through. I had people that had went through it 20 years ago that they just ran into me and they're like, oh, can we chat about what I went through 20 years ago? Do you mind? Because a lot of men don't have people and we're not as likely to go pay for therapy or maybe we don't think that it's, because I believe therapy is good, but therapy is for therapeutic problems. And if you don't feel you have that, what do you do? Right? Maybe you don't talk to your close inner circle about it, because then the joke is always, oh yeah, you're soft, or stop whining about that stuff. Let's just watch the game, kind of thing. Right.
Yeah.
But so I just had men coming to me all the time, like friends and people who maybe were just acquaintances or whatever. And that once they realized that I had gone through it, they were, I think, feeling that I was less likely to be judgmental, and they just started opening up. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of men that are hurting just as much as women are out there. And so that wasn't necessarily a direct motivator for the book, but it was all happening at the same time. So I just thought it was very interesting.
The men that open up to you, do you find that their stories are very similar? Do they have a lot in common? I know every situation is unique. Every divorce is unique. But do you see a lot of commonalities with what men experience?
I do. And unfortunately in Kelowna, since this is a podcast about Kelowna, I don't know if you saw it a few years ago, there was an article, I think in Castanet, that they called the Kelowna curse. They said, if you move here when you're married, after a few years, your chances are not as likely of staying. And I don't know if it's because I think it's because this is the playground for the rich, some people would say, right? It's
funny because I lived in the Cayman Islands for 11 years, and everybody told me that when I went there.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually did go through a divorce in the Cayman Islands.
Okay.
And it's kind of the playground for the rich. And there, it was almost like university in the sense that about 25% of the people would be new each year, and 25% would say, I've had enough, and they leave. Everybody's away from their families. Everybody's kind of a stranger, and it just leads to a lot of issues.
Yes, definitely. And Kelowna is very much like that, very touristy, a lot of students, it's very transient. And so I found it a lot here in Kelowna, and so not only is divorce common here more than I found, I think, in other places, but the experiences are very common, and
so what are some of the things that men go through over and over again?
Well, I find it's usually one end. So far, I found it's mostly one end of the spectrum or the other. There's very few that I can encounter in the middle. I would consider guys like me and you probably in the middle because we've processed a lot of our stuff, and maybe, where I find like people who are doing this kind of work that we're doing, are a certain type of breed. But not to paint everybody with a brush or whatever, but I find like the average man that I meet that, like regular guy has a job, has his normal life, kind of thing, and is not necessarily involved in sort of creative sort of things like this. Those 90% of guys or whatever they fall either on the side of extremely angry, which, and so they're acting out of that most of the time, or extremely broken and are depressed and which I'm amazed at how many men are struggling with depression, but they're not saying anything about it. If you saw them out, you would never know. And, we know mental health is such a big thing right now. Everybody's talking about it, but I definitely think for men and a lot of successful men, they're hiding it like there's nothing else. So yeah, that's been the most, is that it's one or the other. And I find the ones that are depressed are, they're struggling to pick up the pieces, right? And it's either because of failure, they feel like they failed, or they're just in disbelief, there's different things like that, self-worth issues. On the flip side, the ones that are angry, it's pride that's usually the motivator there, I find. And those are the ones, like I've found myself telling guys that I know or guys that I hardly know that, like, stop making it more difficult than it needs to be. Like, I was very grateful for my ex-wife and I went through our split up as amicably as possible. No lawyers. We've always tried to put the kids first, practice what we preach, that kind of thing. And I know it's not like that for everybody, and particularly in Kelowna, there's a lot of people with a lot of assets to fight over, because we say the playground for the rich, right? And so that gets caught up, and people are using things like, like properties and whatever as negotiating pieces, and and it's just all that stuff, and they're just like spending tons on lawyers, and it's ugly. It's really ugly and negative, and my advice is always like, make it easier if you can. Like, it's just stuff most of the time. Like, what's really important is that you're going to be attached. If you have kids, you're going to be attached to this person for the rest of your life, no matter what, in some way, shape, or form. So why make it a terrible process? Like, find a way for everybody to win, and stop. Unfortunately, stop paying the lawyers. We need lawyers, but families need their money too, right?
Yeah.
So
I noticed one thing about the law firms in town are quite large for the size of the city, but maybe that's just an impression. But a lot of times I got to pick up checks for real estate, for law firms. I'm like, you got 3 floors in this building. Like, what's going on?
Well, it's definitely.
I'm not saying it's all Boris, but.
It's definitely a white collar community, and I think, and I find a lot of businesses like that, like even lawyers here, are doing business elsewhere. There's something about Kelowna that a lot of the companies that do well here are their clients are not in Kelowna.
Oh, sure.
Right.
Tech companies.
Yeah. And like, even like marketing, because I'm in brand management, and I know like a lot of like marketing companies and things like that, like they're not even interested in targeting local people as much.
Right.
A company like Castanet's a little different because, they're the local like page, right? And not to knock like a big companies like Kelowna Now and stuff like that too, but on the back end, like, in order to really make money, unfortunately, in a place with 200,000 people, this is not, it's not where you're going to make the big money, right? So you have to get clients in other places.
Very true. So would you agree that most relationships, in hindsight, you could see certain steps that were taken that led to the downfall? And if so, what are some of those mistakes that people make in relationships?
Yes, I definitely. That's a big question, but let's say, for example, when I was preparing people for marriage, when I was helping them prepare, I could always see certain things that I could tell most of the time, and I didn't want to. Like in my head, I was like, I really like them. I would love to see them work out, but like my gut tells me that they're not gonna, like kind of thing. And then often I would hear within a couple years, it's over, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they didn't even make it to the altar, right? And one of the biggest ones was extended family issues and how people dealt with that beforehand going in. Cause I got to see it beforehand, right? Like as they were, I mean, maybe people were dating before and it was already kind of an issue, but it just intensifies when you actually take that step to make it permanent. Right.
Right.
And, so how like culture, again, going back to that, plays a big part. It's like if you say you're marrying somebody from a different culture or you're in a serious relationship, because not everybody's getting married these days. Different cultures have different ways, right? Like how they understand family and
Sure.
like say in Kelowna now we're starting to diversify finally. So we're seeing like we have a huge East Indian population here, like in Kelowna now, and we have we're starting to get like there's been a big influx of the African community and the Caribbean community and things like that, and the Latino community even too as well, like here, and all those cultures, like they're starting to see the overflow from Vancouver with some of the Asian population and stuff like that. Those cultures have a certain way about them, like how they understand family and extended family and all those sorts of things.
Sure.
Whereas the North American European version is a little different, right? Or sometimes very, very different. And so I see that a lot as cultures are blending. That's a big one.
Yeah. Sure.
So that was all I found. That was the number one reason why people either didn't get married or ended up walking away from each other because they couldn't handle how the other person related to their family or lack thereof or whatever.
And it can happen with couples that are of the same ethnicity, right? Like if the wife is really close to her brother and the brother hates the husband, this is gonna create problems down the road, right? Yeah. Or if the parents don't like the one or the other.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely that way. I would say that comes down often to boundaries, right? And again, a simple principle, right? And that's kind of where my book goes. Is it's those simple principles that we forget, or maybe we haven't been told, or we have, So boundaries obviously is a big topic. I don't necessarily deal with that as much in the book, but it's like woven through there. But when it comes to something like extended family, that's, it's a big thing. It's like, well, where do you draw the line? How much do you involve them? How much do you not? What's the boundary between you and your spouse or your significant other or whatever in terms of that? Like, because if you value your family and that's an issue to your spouse or whatever, well, then there's also boundary issues there with your spouse too, right? Because like, where is it, and if it becomes a choice, oh, do I have to choose this one or that one? That's where it becomes an issue, right? I find is that people feel like they have to choose one or the other when really we shouldn't have to, unless it's unhealthy, I think.
Right. So basically, like, the extended family should not be trying to interfere unless there is something unhealthy.
Right. And it, like, if a person can be close with their family and part of that, but if it's a negative thing for their relationship, then you have to figure that out, right? Like with the blending of cultures, I find more these days, I find that more prominent. But like you said, it could happen in any relationship, right? And any if the same ethnicity as well.
Yeah. What are some other problems that, let's try to frame it positive. So what are some of the practical tips that you try to let people know about if they're getting into a relationship? So this is really about people who are thinking about getting into a relationship or already are in a relationship.
It's based on the fact that all life is relationships, and that's what I found. Being an entrepreneur as well, I find like you're in business as well. Like all business is relationship, right? And so those are the people where we go. Where we want a referral. It's based on the relationships that we have with somebody. We trust them, and they refer us to someone else. Like it's everything is like that. And so I found, one of the things that I hear is common. I was just talking about this yesterday with somebody, and this morning is that in Kelowna, people say it's hard to find loyal friends. And something, since we're talking about Kelowna in this podcast, because it's a transient community, because it's a touristy community, because it's, there's not a big middle class here. It's just a different type of place, right? And a lot of snowbirds, a lot of, there's just a lot of movement, and some people grew up here, and so those people maybe have a community, but most people that come from somewhere else, they find it really hard to find loyal people here. They say that's the word that keeps coming up. And so I found that these principles, there's just another example. It's just certain things that if you're trying to build relationships, or that's what you desire, that to be in relationship with other people, maybe we need to be more aware and conscious of these things. And maybe for us, like if people want to be in relationship with us, whether it be business wise or our family or friends or whatever, maybe we need to be more conscious of how we're also, like, how are we as a friend or as a parent or as a, it's not always just the other person, right? So,
yeah, totally true.
Kelowna, being a local author, I'm hoping that people here will appreciate that, and that I think Kelowna is a very artistic place, and it's a place where creativity can flow for a lot of people, because it's a beautiful place, and and there's this different sort of, like, everybody has like a side hustle or a project that they're working on or whatever. It just seems like that here in Kelowna, and so I think there is this large spirit of supporting each other here, and like other local people that are trying to make a difference or build something or whatever that is of impact. And so I'm hoping that people in Kelowna that hear this will help spread the word that there's another local author here, and that my book it's not. I feel like it needs to be for the world. Like, more people need to let people know, and it's not an egotistical thing. It's just because of the topic. And it's not a memoir. It's not like a novel or whatever, it's about real life. And I feel like it needs to be in the hands of more people. That's why I wrote it and why I did that. And it was a goal of mine to publish it on my birthday. That was the goal. My birthday's February 10th. And so on Valentine's Day, I went live on Amazon. So it was that was this year. That was my 2019. That was my goal for myself. That was my birthday present. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Is that the best place to find the book, on Amazon? And we'll put a link in the show notes. So
yeah. So the book is available on Amazon in print. You just order it and they'll send it to you. So it's selling at $12.99 US and $18.99 Canadian, basically. But if you buy it on Amazon, it's probably in US dollars. And then it's also available in digital version. You can download it. And if you have a Kindle subscription, you can read it for free. Nice. So you just search chocolate covered French fries or my name, Kevin Kishor, Kishor. Locally right now, we have it available, and there's a Christian bookstore downtown called Loaves and Fishes, like the bread, Loaves and Fishes bookstore on Lawrence Avenue, behind Safeway. And, so the hope is that we're going to be in Chapters and Mosaic and every bookstore and on the continent, right? Eventually. But for now, because it's so new, so people can get it through me, through the store in Kelowna, or on Amazon, whichever way they want right now.
That's great.
I post a vlog every week on my Instagram page and Facebook. So on my Instagram, it's kevin.kishor. If they want to look, anybody wants to follow that, every Wednesday I post a vlog. On Facebook, my public page for that, the username is @chocolate-covered-french-fries.
Okay.
And so you can search that, and you'd find that. And then on YouTube, under my name, Kevin Kishor, I post all the videos in one place. So if anybody wanted to go back and just see them all in one place or wants to subscribe there, you could do that as well.
Great.
The podcast is still in the works, but I believe that'll be the next venture for this project.
Well, that's great. Kevin, do you still get homesick for Toronto?
Yeah, Toronto's home, and especially right now with the Raptors.
Yeah,
doing
I was going to ask you, you're a
well.
Raptors fan. So, and where are you going to be watching on Monday?
I haven't decided yet where I'm going to watch it. Sometimes nice to watch in a public place with the energy, but my kids like to watch the game too. So sometimes do that with them at home or whatever. But yeah, when I was actually back in Toronto the week that they beat Milwaukee to go advance to the finals, and I'd already booked my ticket to come back 2 days before game one of the finals. I was there meeting with my publicist, and so I actually want to give her a shout out, Jacqueline Escano. She's, for anybody who's listening to this that maybe is looking for a publicist or a PR person in Toronto area, but obviously she's working with me and I'm in Kelowna.
Great.
Yeah, so I was kicking myself because I could have stayed for game 1 and 2 when I was back home, and but the tickets were crazy. But the city is on fire. The whole area is like all over. It's just the buzz in that in Ontario and that region is it's nuts.
That's awesome. I grew up a Toronto Blue Jays fan. And a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. So I remember what that was like in the early 90s with
Joe Carter and all.
Yeah, it was insane. It was insane. And the Leafs were pretty good then too. They almost made it, but
Doug Gilmour
broke our hearts. Yeah. But,
no, I was in Toronto when Blue Jays a couple years ago almost did it. Remember that?
That was exciting.
The city was on fire then too.
Yeah, huge sports town. Toronto is. So.
Definitely. I mean, it makes me sad that Vancouver gave up our basketball team. I mean, we still got the Whitecaps and the Lions, and but yeah, that was a big loss. And Seattle. Being a basketball fan, I'm like, man, the closest place is Portland to get an NBA game.
Yeah, that's pretty far.
That's not too bad actually when you think about it. It's the same drive to Edmonton.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. That's awesome. Kevin, would you like to nominate someone connected to the city of Kelowna to come on the show?
Yeah. There's so many people that
you can do more than one. We had someone do 7.
Really?
Most people say 1 or 2.
Yeah.
But it's just someone you would love to hear from.
I think I would nominate. I'll nominate 3 people.
Great.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
So, first one is gonna be one of my best friends, Chris Veal.
Okay.
So it's spelled Veale.
Okay.
And he's a realtor in town. But I think his story would be interesting for this podcast because of why he chose to settle down in Kelowna and based on his journey before that.
Nice.
So he has a good story, I think, that Kelowna would like to appreciate. Right. The second one is I call him Kamso because that's his. So Kamso. He's a Nigerian friend of mine. Mm-hmm. He goes by Anthony as well, which is a lot easier for people to pronounce. Mm-hmm. And I'll get you the spelling of his last name. And he is, he's here, living here now. He's been here for quite a few years now, and he's trying to help build the diversity and to encourage, especially like the African students that we have here now that he's been here for a while, because we're getting a massive influx in that way, and
nice.
and other cultures too. Like he's just big on culture and diversity, and I'd like to give him a shout out. And then the third one would be Renee Wasilic. I don't know if you've had her on.
I've had her recently,
yeah. Okay.
You can look that up. It's it was published a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
but great story. She's awesome.
Yeah, well, because I worked on her recent nomination run. I was doing the brand management for her, and so just now where she is, it would have been a really cool time to just hear what after all that the dust has settled from that, and maybe what she's thinking next and all that. But she's a great friend too. So
great person.
Yeah,
I would like to have her back now that that's over. So Yeah.
So you could tell her I nominated her. I got nothing but love for that woman.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kevin. I've really enjoyed this chat, and I'm going to check out your book.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that.
Cheers.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Newtown Big Dreams podcast with your host, Luke Menkes, and his authentic guests. And we love our listeners and hope you subscribe now to learn more about the amazing journeys of our incredible guests who relocated to find a new town, big dreams. And remember, make your dreams big.